Hi, this is Cold Warrior 78. I'm Ron. Today we're going to start an introduction to the concept of disaster preparedness. I'm doing this because of a couple of reasons. First off, this recent pandemic thing has a lot of people thinking about being prepared when they haven't been up to this point. And several of the folks that I listen to on YouTube about preparedness and things like that made the point that everybody who is involved with preparedness needs to make their own videos to get the word out to people that you need to be prepared. First off, you can be prepared. It's entirely possible to have gone through this virus deal, the lockdown and everything went with it, without any panic, without any fuss, without any stress, because you have what you need. So let me get into my version of the introduction to disaster preparedness. We're going to go through in great detail in separate videos each of the various topics we're going to cover today. So this is a very broad brush introduction. And I'm assuming that you guys are new to the concept of preparedness, or if you've already been around a while and been looking and researching and doing, that you're going to use this to make sure you've got all your bases covered, that different perspective, different set of information. It's all pretty much the same concept, but everybody's got a different slant on it. So you're new and you're looking for information. Secondly, that you want to protect your family from the potential chaos of the various natural disasters that go on out there. So what is disaster preparedness? Well, it's very simply thinking ahead to get ready for the kinds of events, hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, whatever, that happen in your area, that have historically happened in your area, and they're going to continue to happen in your area. So really, shouldn't you be prepared for them? Now, and excuse me if I glance down, I'm referring to notes because of other previous two times that I've tried to do this video, I wandered all over the place, and I don't want to do that. So excuse me if I look down every once in a while. Okay, so the why. Being prepared simply means, as I mentioned before, a level of normalcy and protection for your family that would otherwise they'd be in chaos, stressed, and potentially in danger if you're not prepared. We'll go into some of that later on, but your job as a parent, and to me, if you're a man, if you're a husband, I've got a Christian background, and as the husband, God put you in charge of making sure your family is safe. If your family's starving, if they're not safe, that's your fault. Bottom line. Now, how do you do this? All right, very simply, you've got skills and you got stuff. Okay? Skills, stuff. We're going to talk all about the skills and the stuff, but you need basic skills. Things like emergency first aid. You got to be able to stop bleeding. Basic cooking skills. I mean, you don't have to be a chef, but you got to be able to make food edible that your family can eat. You got to have some stuff. Water, food. I mean, you got to have water and food. Medical, protection. We'll go over some other categories. Personally, to me, skills are more important because they're transportable. You lose everything you have, you still have your skills. However, knowledge, or I should say skills, because to me knowledge is like information from a book that you don't really know how to use. Skills are down in your hands. You know how to use tools, whatever that is, those are skills. Skills are more important, but there's a balance between skills and stuff. Don't be the kind of guy who has a checklist and I bought this, I bought this, I bought this. Okay, good, we're prepared. Skills are critical to this whole thing. So like I said, we're going to do detailed videos later on all these subjects that we're talking about. But there's two overriding considerations I want you to keep in mind through this. Because when you start out in this, it can be overwhelming. There's all these details and all this garbage out there. Keep it simple and start now. Okay? Simple. Start now. Okay, we got that? It can be simple, and you can start it now. Don't stress the details at the moment. Make sense? All right. Now, before I go on, at the end of the video, I'm going to share with you some of the resources, references that I used when I first got started, and some video channels and some other online resources that I continue to use today on this journey. As you look, or particularly if you look around the internet for information, if you find guys that are going to tell you 55 reasons why you're going to die because you're too stupid to live, don't go there. Don't click on that crap. Anytime you start looking at something and they're dealing from a position of fear, you're in the wrong place. Okay? Preparedness is all about dealing from a position of strength. Because when you're in a position of strength, you can help other people. That's preparedness. This fear and all that crap, this doom and gloom, it's known in the industry, so to speak, as doomer porn. It's all about scaring people, and it's upsetting, and 90% of it's garbage anyway. So if you're going to go to those kind of places, at least hit the good channels first so that you have a basis of what's going on. Then you can go listen to why the sky is falling. Okay? So let's start out with the number one thing. Food. We're going to do a lot of videos on this because food is such a wide open area. But basically, in its most simple form, you have to eat. You have to eat daily, preferably several times a day, if you're like most Americans. So what do you have? You know, how much food do you have on hand now that you can completely eat, completely prepare and serve without going to the store for anything like, oh, I need this, I need ketchup, I need whatever. No. What do you got right now that if you locked your door and didn't leave your home, you could eat? Now, the good news is this is simple. Whatever you guys eat now, get more. And I don't mean thousands of dollars more right off the bat, but just, try to get to your initial stage in this. And I'm assuming you go shopping, say, once a week. If you go shopping once a week, have this week's food that you're eating, and then have next week's food. Okay? So you're a week ahead. You've got 1 week extra food. And the reason why I say it's not the week you're eating now, because let's say you go shopping on Saturday, on Friday night you're almost out of food. So you've got a week left at the end of whatever food you're eating right now. Make sense? Now, if you do this on a 2-week basis, try to get a little bit more. If you're doing this on a monthly basis, try to get a little bit more. You're not going to be able to buy, like, let's say you, like in the Army, we went food shopping about once a month because we got paid once a month. If that's kind of the situation you're in, you're not going to be able to buy another month's worth of food all in that 1 month. But buy a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. And make sure it's the stuff your family eats right now. Why is that important? Changing food stresses people out. I've known folks that, I need food, and they go out and buy something off the internet, some freeze-dried something or other in a bucket or a can or whatever. And it tastes different. It tastes funny. It may not taste good. I don't know. Some of these things out there are real garbage. You can do most of the food you need to have with whatever you're getting right now. If you look at food in the grocery store, and I'm not talking fresh fruits and vegetables, I'm not talking fresh dairy, I'm talking all the stuff on the interior aisles, all the jars and cans and boxes, that stuff's good for way over a year. Way over a year. And in fact, the reality is commercially canned foods, beans, soups, tuna, those kind of things, shoot, they're good for 30 years or more if you store them at any kind of condition. Commercially canned food really doesn't have an expiration date. Now, on it says, best if used by. Understand that does not mean it's going to rot on. All right? It just means it's going to taste best if you use it in that time period. And that's typically a year or more out from when you buy it. So This is not a big stretch. So try to get yourself, that extra week on top. We'll get into the details later on, but that 1 week is a handy thing. Your yardstick should be literally, if I got to lock the front door right now, how many days can we go without having to go to the store? How many days can we go before we're hungry? How many days can we go before whatever? All right, that's a good yardstick to use. Now, besides food, though, you got to consider other things. Do you have a stove? Of course, everybody's got a stove now, but if the grid goes down, if the electricity goes off, which is typically part of storms and fires and all those other things, your power goes out. If your power goes out, how do you cook this? Most of the people I know are living in these all-electric homes. They don't have any way to cook other than their electric stove. That can be an issue. Consider grills and camping stoves and all sorts of portable kinds of deals. But you got to have a way to cook it. You got to have a way to clean up after it. Okay, if the power is down, the water may or may not be down. So make sure you've got some way to handle that. Okay? Water is the next point we're going to talk about. Do you have any on hand? I mean, if the water stopped right now with no notice, if it just stopped coming out the tap, what do you got? Do you have bottled water? Do you have a couple of 5-gallon cans? Do you have, the 1-gallon jugs? Do you have anything? Okay? Get some. A number of ways to look at the numbers on this. 1 gallon a day per person or more to drink. Now, and if you live in the South or anywhere where it's humid, Kansas in the middle of July, you're going to drink more than 1 gallon a day if you're out being productive in that heat. And that's just 1 gallon a day per person to drink. Okay, that's a bare minimum, but it's a start. So get that. Get that for a week if you can. I don't know how big your family is. That may be some issues, but certainly look at getting a week's worth of water. Now, in reality, we'll go in a whole video on this. You're going to have to plan on something like 5 gallons a day if you're going to include things like food for cooking, food for dishes, water to cook. And because if you boil pasta or rice, you're eating up a bunch of water. You're going to have to wash dishes. You're going to have to wash your body at least a minimum to get by for sanitation. 5 gallons a day is that threshold. If you're talking absolutely there's no water coming in anywhere and you got to provide it all, what we learned in the Army is you got to plan on 10 gallons a day per person to do all the things we've talked about already, and showers, brushing teeth, laundry, and all the other kinds of things that take water. 10 gallons a day per person is a lot of water. You're not going to be able to store that. Okay, so focus on drinking water, at least 1 gallon per person per day. Try to get at least a week's worth. We'll get into the rest of it later on. You also need to consider, and we'll hit this in the other videos, since you can't store it all, where are you going to get more? Do you have a well? Are there streams, lakes, rivers, anything in your neighborhood? How do you treat that water? Okay, chlorine, filters, Sawyer mini filters are one of my favorites, but there's lots of them on the market, Big Berkeys and all kinds of other things. UV radiation kills germs. There are those options. Pasteurization, which is not quite boiling, but gets it hot enough, long enough that it kills germs, or boiling on a stove. Do you have fuel? All right, these things are all connected. Next one, we're going to talk about medical. Do you have the skills to stop the bleeding? No, the bleeding, what bleeding? In a grid down situation, much of the time, people are going to be doing strenuous work that they're not used to doing. Axes, machetes, handsaws, God help you, a chainsaw, and something goes wrong. Something can go very wrong with anything that's sharp. Even preparing dinner and knife slips and you cut your hand. How do you stop the bleeding? Do you have the skills to stop the bleeding? If you don't, Learn them. Now, the good news is that there are a wealth of free classes out there in basic first aid, stop the bleeding kind of stuff. You can look online in your area, check the local newspapers out, everything from the YMCA's and adult education classes, VOTEX, sometimes the local EMT community teaches classes. Basic first aid, stop the bleeding kind of classes, life-saving kind of things, and then get more detailed and higher level training as you go. Because it's one thing to say, okay, got the bleeding stopped, now I got to take them to the hospital, but hey, the hospital got blown away in that tornado, there is no hospital. Now what do you do? Okay. So there are some higher level things besides just stopping the bleeding that you're going to have to deal with. So training, skills are critical in medical things, but then you got to have supplies as well. You got to have the stuff. If you got the skills, you can kind of make do with stuff in a t-shirt in that wound, but it'd be way better to have the right stuff. Okay, so medical is one of those places where absolutely worth every cent you're going to spend to get good training and to buy good equipment. Okay, do not skimp on medical. This is not the place to buy cheap Chinese crap. This is a place to spend money. We'll get into this in the other detail, but like North American Rescue type equipment. Medical stuff ain't cheap, but it's worth every penny. First aid kits, do you have any? Gauze, tourniquets. Do you know how to use a tourniquet? Okay, I guess I'm beating that one to death. Lighting. What do you got? Flashlights, headlamps, lanterns, candles. Do you have anything? Do you have the fuel for the lanterns? Do you have batteries for the flashlights? I find headlamps really useful for working, but they're lousy for area lighting. So a mixture of lanterns and flashlights and things, probably a good idea. If you're going to start using fire for light, do you have a fire extinguisher? Several of them. You kind of need to. Okay, so I'm just, again, trying to get the wheels turning in your head so you start thinking about things. Communications and information gathering. We're a communications intensive society with the internet today. How do you get your news? How do you get your information? Riding back and forth to work in a car? Do you get it television news? Do you get the internet? What do you do when the grid goes down and those sources may not be available? The internet may or may not be available through the cell system. The cell system isn't going to be there forever. Those towers are going to go down within a couple of days because they just don't have enough gas in the generators. How do you communicate? Do you have a communications plan? If you're in a disaster-prone area, really good idea to have, like Aunt Betty, who lives 100 miles away, is the call hub for, hey, I'm all right, I'm at work, hey, I'm all right, I'm at school, hey, I'm all right. And she becomes the information collection point. But do you have a plan? How are you going to communicate if cell phones don't work? If the internet's down? Where are you going to get your information? Battery radios. Do you have one? They make these great little crank radios. They've, all sorts of other radios out there. Get weather radios. Typically built into most emergency radios. You need to know what's going on with the weather because the weather is typically what's driving a lot of these disasters. And even if they're not, you need to know what the weather is going to be because that's going to affect you in a disaster situation way more than it does on a normal day. All right, so communications, commo, ham radios. Do you think you need to know what's going on in the greater world? Shortwave radios that you can receive information on. Protection. This is one that comes up right away. A lot of guys jump in on I need to get guns for survival. No, hang on. If you got a gun, I don't want to talk about guns until we've covered everything else first. Protection is a lot more than just guns. How safe is your home now? What is your area like? Are you in an area where it's kind of sketchy right now? If you're in an area that's kind of sketchy, you might might want to consider moving somewhere. Okay? So, protection. What's your area like now? Is it prone to civil unrest if the grid goes down? If the government stops paying checks because the banks are having an issue, or whatever. Keeping a low profile, reinforcing your doors and door jambs, security systems, they all help, and they're all on the front end more important than having firearms. But firearms are certainly a part of this, and they're going to be discussed in great detail when I get to that video. But don't prioritize guns and ammo over food and medical. That's stupid. You got to eat every day. You got to drink every day. You are very likely not to have to ever shoot anybody. I can honestly say that during this whole coronavirus thing, I didn't shoot anybody. But I ate every day, and I drank every day. Okay? Now, understand that when you start talking about firearms, skills are critical. Skills mean the difference literally between life and death for you and somebody else. So you've got to get good training, and then you got to get out and practice. And both of those can be expenses. There's certainly expenses attached to both of those. So don't run out and buy a gun right away. That's not your first step in preparedness. It'll be a part later on once we get things straight. All right? So in conclusion, there's lots and lots of details. There's lots of lists. Checklist mentality is something you got to be kind of careful of because it can cover all the bases. But if you just put a check mark in there and don't really know, that's not really healthy. So remember the two overriding considerations. Keep it simple. Start now. Start with food, water, maybe some medical. If you get a chance to take a class, take a class. We'll deal with the other things later. Now, I'm going to talk about some references that I have used. The first is, let's see if this comes out, Survivalist Family, Prepared Americans for a Stronger America. That's by Joe Fox. He's also got a website up here I'm going to talk about in a minute. Good general book on the concepts of disaster, preparedness, survival, and those kind of things. The next one I want to talk about is How to Survive the End of the World as We Know It. John Wesley Rawls, one of the originators, probably not the right term, but one of the first guys I ever heard of who talked about preparedness in a systematic fashion. Although a lot of these guys have been doing it for a while, and I just didn't know. I wasn't paying any attention. If you like lists, this is the book for you. Again, he goes over concepts just like Joe Fox does, but this is list intensive. How much food, how much water, all that kind of stuff. It's a good start point if you're an A-type personality, if you really like getting into details. But like anything, it shouldn't be the only reference. Okay? But it's an excellent reference. Start there. There are survival guides, survival manuals. Everybody and his brother puts them out. The American Army, the SAS. Half a dozen celebrity survivalists have their own survival books out. Get one. They're all pretty much the same. So that you have survival skills. Now, hopefully you don't need survival skills. You're in house. But learning to make a fire, make an immediate shelter, staying warm and dry overnight, those kind of things are good skills to have. You're going to have to practice them, but the first step is get a book and read about them. Okay? Now I'm going to take a break for a second, and I'm going to show you the internet resources that I use and that I trust. Okay? So stand by. All right, we're back. And I hope you can read these behind you. I'll read them off to you in case the whiteboard doesn't come through very well on the screen. But these are references I trust, and you can trust them as well. The first couple are YouTube channels. They also have websites backing them up. Viking Preparedness, Pastor Joe Fox. Absolutely excellent on general preparedness, family preparedness, all that kind of stuff. Bear Independent. Again, he wrote an entire series of YouTube called The Prepper Classroom. Highly recommend you stop in and watch that. Reality Survival and Prepping. J.J. Johnson was a survival instructor in the United States Air Force. Good guy, very articulate, very smart. Has a number of probably, all these guys have thousands of videos literally in backlog on these survival and preparedness topics. Southern Prepper 1 hasn't been real active recently, but he was one of the first preparedness guys I really started listening to. I trust what he says. It's very well thought out, very common sense is a real big deal in preparedness. All these guys have that in spades. Top 4 were YouTube channels. Then there's survivalblog.com. That's mostly written stuff. Blog, you would think so. Categories from gardening to wilderness survival to preparedness. It covers all the bases. And then the one on the bottom I want to point out particularly is Preparedness.com. Preparedness is a group of like-minded people who are trying to be prepared for various disasters and things that are coming. All right. The leader of this, Forrest Garvin, just did I believe it was a 7-part class on preparedness. Preparedness 101, I believe was the name of it. If you go to the YouTube channel, Preparedness, you can see that series. It was supposed to be for the premium members, the guys who pay $40 a year, but we all recommended and supported his decision to put it out for free because people need to know this information. Prepping is not weird, it's not hard, it's simple and straightforward, and it's common sense. So go to these guys. Certainly check out anybody that you're going to listen to on the subject of preparedness. They need to be honest enough to tell you where other people are that have information, because nobody is an expert in this thing, because we haven't gone through we may have gone through some small disasters, been through hurricanes and stuff like that, but you don't know what's going to happen, and you can't pontificate that what I do is what you need to do, because I don't know what's going on in your area. Make sense? Okay. So I'll have more videos on specific subject areas. These guys have a wealth of information already out there. Frankly, the only reason I'm doing this is to reach people they haven't reached yet. And if you hit my channel, watch the videos I've got, depending on timeline of how many more of them I've gotten out, go ahead and check these guys out. I'm not worried at all about anything these guys say. I trust them. They put out solid information. You can trust them too. All right. So, Cold Warrior 78, get back out in the woods and have a good time. And from a prepping standpoint, start thinking ahead. Thanks a lot. Have a good time.